Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The Rooms That Changed Shape of the Mirror-Filled Funhouse. Chapter 1: The Laughing Entrance. The carnival should not have been there. That was the first thought that crossed Jonah Mercer's mind as the fog thinned and revealed the rusted gates rising from the trees like the ribs of something long dead. The road that led them here was a narrow service path, half swallowed by weeds, absent from every map Jonah had checked. One moment they'd been driving through dense forest, headlights carving tunnels through mist, and the next the trees had peeled back to reveal peeling banners, collapsed booths, and a Ferris wheel frozen mid-rotation, its cars creaking softly in the wind. A carnival without sound. No generators. No distant music. No laughter. Just the whisper of fog sliding across metal and canvas. "Okay," Lena said from the passenger seat, leaning forward. "Tell me you see that too." Jonah swallowed. "Yeah, I see it." In the back seat, Marcus let out a low whistle. "That wasn't here last year. I would have remembered a nightmare funfair in the middle of nowhere." Tess didn't speak. She stared through the windshield, her reflection faintly doubled in the glass. Her brow was furrowed, lips pressed tight, as though she were trying to recall something she'd almost forgotten. They parked just inside the gates, tires crunching over gravel that sounded too loud in the silence. The fog closed behind them, swallowing the road entirely. When Jonah killed the engine, the sudden quiet felt oppressive, like a held breath. Above the gate hung a sign, its letters flaking and crooked. The Mirror-Filled Funhouse. Below it, painted in faded red. "Step inside and see yourself." "That's inviting," Marcus muttered, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. Lena grinned nervously. "Come on. You guys wanted something creepy for the channel. This is practically begging us." Jonah didn't respond. He was watching the fog. It seemed thicker beyond the gate, coiling around the rides, brushing against them with slow intent. For a brief, irrational moment, he thought it was retreating from the funhouse itself. Like it didn't want to go near it. They passed through the gate. The carnival grounds were a graveyard of attractions. A ring toss stand sagged under the weight of rain and neglect. Stuffed animals hung limp and mold-spotted, their stitched smiles grotesque in the half-light. The Ferris wheel loomed overhead, metal groaning softly as the wind nudged it. Then there was the funhouse. It sat at the center of the grounds, larger than it should have been, its facade painted with enormous grinning faces whose eyes were mirrors themselves. The paint had cracked and peeled, but the mirrors gleamed, spotless, reflecting the fog and the four of them in warped fragments. Jonah felt an unpleasant jolt as he caught sight of his reflection. His face appeared stretched vertically, eyes too far apart, smile lagging half a second behind his actual expression. He looked away quickly. Tess stepped closer to the entrance, her boots crunching over gravel. "Does anyone else feel like..." She hesitated, searching for words. "Like it's watching us?" Marcus snorted. "It's a building." Lena raised her camera anyway, red light blinking on. "A building with mirrors for eyes." The entrance yawned open, a curtain of heavy plastic strips hanging limp and discolored. Beyond them was darkness, punctuated by faint glimmers of reflected light. Jonah hesitated. Every instinct told him to turn back, to get in the car and drive until the fog gave way to something familiar and safe. But curiosity, and the unspoken pressure of not wanting to be the one who chickened out, kept his feet moving. As he stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The plastic strips brushed against his skin, cold and damp, sending a shiver up his spine. The smell hit him next. Dust, mildew, and something sharper beneath it, like old metal and ozone. The entrance corridor was narrow, lined floor to ceiling with mirrors. Dim bulbs flickered overhead, their light refracting endlessly, multiplying the group into a crowd of distorted copies. Every step sent reflections rippling outward. Lena laughed softly, trying to mask her unease. Classic funhouse stuff. Just mirrors. But her laughter echoed too long, bouncing strangely, as though the corridor were longer than it appeared. Jonah counted his steps automatically. 10 paces. 20. The corridor should have ended by now. Marcus said, slowing. Wasn't this shorter from the outside? Tess stopped walking. The others did too, their reflections freezing in dozens of poses. It changed, she said quietly. Jonah frowned. What change? She turned slowly, scanning the corridor. The space. When we came in, it felt smaller. That's just the mirrors messing with your depth perception, Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. They continued, and the corridor finally opened into a square room filled with angled mirrors and tilted floors. The room looked wrong in subtle ways. Corners that didn't quite meet, reflections that bent light at impossible angles. Jonah's reflection split into 3 versions of himself, each moving slightly out of sync. He lifted his hand. 2 reflections mirrored the motion. The third lagged, fingers twitching a moment later. His heart skipped. He lowered his hand. The delayed reflection lingered, fingers curling slowly, then snapped back into alignment. Did you see that? He asked. Lena frowned. See what? Nothing, he said quickly, though his skin prickled. A sign hung crookedly above a doorway leading deeper inside. Keep moving. Don't stare too long. Marcus laughed, a sharp sound that echoed too loudly. What kind of funhouse tells you not to stare? They moved on. The next room was wider, its walls lined with mirrors that curved inward, creating the illusion of endless depth. The floor sloped subtly, causing Jonah to lean without realizing it. The air felt heavier here, pressing against his ears. Lena filmed everything, narrating in a hushed voice. We're inside the mirror-filled funhouse. Place has been abandoned for decades, but the mirrors are, weirdly clean. As if in response, one of the mirrors rippled. Jonah blinked. The glass stilled, smooth and reflective. Okay, Marcus said, pointing. That one just moved. It's the light, Lena said automatically. But Jonah saw it too. A shimmer, like a reflection breathing. Tess stood apart from them now, staring into a tall mirror at the far end of the room. Her reflection looked off. Not distorted like the others. Just wrong in a way Jonah couldn't articulate. Tess? He called. She didn't answer. He stepped toward her, and the floor shifted beneath his feet. Not tilted, shifted, like something adjusting its grip. He stumbled, catching himself against a mirror. The glass was warm. He recoiled, heart hammering. Tess, he said again, louder. She turned, eyes wide. Jonah, I thought I saw another door. There's only one, Marcus said, gesturing behind them. Tess shook her head slowly. No, in the mirror. There was a hallway behind me. Jonah looked. The mirror showed only the room they were in. Maybe it was a reflection of another room, Lena suggested, though her voice trembled. They regrouped, unease settling over them like dust. The funhouse creaked softly, a sound like wood bending under pressure. Somewhere deeper inside, a mechanical laugh sputtered to life, warped and distant, then died abruptly. Jonah checked his phone. No signal. The time display flickered, then went blank. Guys, he said quietly. I think we should head back. Marcus nodded immediately. Yeah, this place is messing with me. They turned around. The entrance corridor was gone. In its place stood another room, longer, narrower, lined with mirrors that reflected only darkness. Lena's breath caught. That wasn't here before. The sign above the doorway had changed. Keep going. The mirrors around them seemed to lean inward, ever so slightly, like an audience drawing closer. Jonah felt a sudden, overwhelming certainty settle in his chest. The funhouse was not abandoned. It was waiting, and it had just closed the door behind them. Chapter 2: Corridors that Breathe. No one spoke for a long moment. The room they stood in hummed softly, not with electricity but with something deeper, a low vibration that Jonah felt more in his bones than his ears. The mirrors lining the walls reflected the four of them from impossible angles, stretching and compressing their bodies into grotesque variations. The reflections blinked at different times. Some smiled when the real faces didn't. "Okay," Lena finally whispered. "That's not normal." Jonah stepped toward the doorway marked "Keep Going," then hesitated. The air spilling from beyond it was colder, tinged with a damp, metallic scent. "We need to find another way out. Maybe the layout loops." Marcus rubbed his arms. Funhouses are designed to disorient. Mirrors, fake walls, rotating floors. There's probably an exit somewhere. Tess didn't look convinced. She kept glancing at the mirrors, especially the ones behind them. Jonah followed her gaze and felt his stomach tighten. Their reflections seemed closer to the glass now, faces pressed too near, breath fogging the surface though none of them were breathing that hard. "Let's not stand here," she said. "I don't like whatever this is." They moved forward. The corridor beyond was narrow and elongated, its walls lined with vertical mirrors that warped their bodies into thin, towering figures. The ceiling arched high above them, painted black, swallowing the weak glow of flickering bulbs. Each step echoed strangely, sometimes doubling, sometimes vanishing altogether. Jonah counted again without meaning to. 10 steps. 20. 30. The corridor stretched. "Guys," he said, "this isn't right. We've been walking straight for too long." Marcus frowned. "It's probably angled. Mirrors make it feel longer." But then the floor beneath Jonah's feet shifted. Not tilted. Not slanted. It expanded. The sensation was subtle but unmistakable, like stepping onto a surface that was slowly inflating. The floorboards creaked softly, stretching apart by fractions of an inch. Jonah stumbled, catching himself on the wall. The mirror he touched rippled like disturbed water. He yanked his hand back with a gasp. "What?" Lena asked sharply. "The floor," Jonah said. "It's moving." As if responding, the corridor seemed to exhale. The walls widened imperceptibly, mirrors sliding apart with a soft, fleshy sound. The ceiling lifted, giving the illusion of space opening up around them. The air grew heavier, thicker, pressing against their skin. Tess whimpered softly. "It's breathing." Marcus laughed, too loud, too fast. "No, no way. It's just old mechanics settling." But even as he spoke, his reflection in the mirror beside him leaned forward, hands flattening against the glass as though pushing outward. Lena noticed it too. "Marcus," she said slowly. "Your reflection's not." Marcus turned. The reflection snapped back into place. He stared at it, face pale. "Okay, I saw that." The corridor ended abruptly, opening into a circular room. The walls curved inward, lined entirely with mirrors that reflected each other endlessly. The effect was dizzying, an infinite tunnel of distorted copies receding into darkness. The floor here was rubbery beneath their feet, compressing slightly with each step, then rebounding with a faint squelch. Jonah's throat tightened. "This floor feels wrong." "Don't think about it," Marcus said. "Just keep moving." At the center of the room stood a single pillar of mirrors, rotating slowly on a hidden axis. As it turned, reflections slid across its surface, faces, limbs, eyes, some theirs, some unfamiliar. Lena circled it cautiously, camera raised. "I don't like this. Funhouses don't usually have moving mirror pillars." As if offended, the pillar sped up slightly. The reflections blurred. Then one image sharpened. Jonah stopped breathing. The reflection facing him wasn't his own. It was him, same clothes, same face, but older. Gaunter. Eyes hollowed, skin sallow. The reflection's mouth moved. "Turn back," it mouthed silently. Jonah staggered back, colliding with Tess. "What's wrong?" she asked. He couldn't tear his eyes away. The reflection raised a hand and pressed it flat against the glass, palm aligning perfectly with Jonah's own without him moving. "Don't look," he whispered. "Too late." Lena gasped. "Jonah, your reflection just moved on its own." The room lurched. The floor bulged upward at the center, forcing them outward toward the walls. The mirrors bowed inward in response, their surfaces curving, narrowing the space. The air grew warmer, damp, carrying the smell of sweat and old breath. "Back!" Marcus shouted. "Back to the corridor." They ran, but the corridor entrance had shrunk. What had been a wide opening was now a narrow slit, barely shoulder width. The walls pressed inward with a slow, relentless force, mirrors scraping softly as they moved. The room was contracting. Jonah shoved Lena through first, then Tess. Marcus followed, but the opening tightened further, mirrors brushing his shoulders, smearing cold glass across his skin. "Move!" Jonah yelled. Marcus squeezed through just as the gap snapped shut behind him with a dull, echoing thump. The mirrors sealed seamlessly, leaving no sign an opening had ever existed. They stood in the new corridor, gasping for breath. Silence pressed in around them, broken only by the soft, rhythmic sound of something shifting behind the walls. "That room," Lena said shakily. "It was closing." "It wasn't just the room," Tess whispered. "It was choosing." The corridor ahead sloped downward now, curving gently. The mirrors here were different, older, spotted with black rot at the edges. Their reflections appeared delayed, movements trailing behind like afterimages burned into glass. Jonah noticed something else. Their reflections were changing, subtly at first, eyes a shade too dark, smiles lingering too long. But as they walked, the differences became harder to ignore. Lena's reflection began blinking out of sync. Marcus's reflection lagged behind by nearly a full second. Tess's reflection smiled. She wasn't smiling. "Tess," Jonah said carefully. "Don't turn around." She froze. "Why?" "Your reflection," he swallowed, "it's not matching you." Lena glanced and sucked in a sharp breath. "It's grinning." Tess's reflection stared straight ahead, lips pulled back in a wide, eager smile, eyes gleaming. Slowly, deliberately, the reflection lifted its hand. Tess did not. "Stop," Tess whispered. "Please stop." The reflection pressed its palm to the glass, then leaned forward, nose flattening against the mirror as though the surface were soft. The corridor pulsed. The walls inched closer. Jonah grabbed Tess's arm and pulled her forward. The reflection resisted, lagging behind, stretching unnaturally until it snapped back into alignment with a sharp crack. Tess screamed. They ran. The corridor twisted as they fled, bending at impossible angles. Corners appeared where none had been before, then vanished behind them. The ceiling lowered, forcing them to crouch, then rose suddenly, nearly knocking them over. The funhouse wasn't static. It was reacting. Every fear tightened the walls. Every hesitation reshaped the path. They burst into another room, this one long and rectangular, mirrors on the walls and ceiling, the floor covered in shallow water that rippled with each step. The reflections shimmered, broken by waves. Jonah splashed forward, heart-hammering. Halfway across the room, the water deepened abruptly, soaking his legs to the knee. He stumbled, catching himself. "Guys," he said, "the floor's dropping." Behind him, the water rose higher, swallowing his calves. The far end of the room stretched away, elongating, the exit receding as they approached. The room was growing, and shrinking, and breathing. Tess sobbed openly now. "It's alive. This place is alive." The mirrors above them darkened, reflections fading, replaced by something else. Moving shapes, pressing against the glass from the other side. Jonah felt a crushing certainty settle over him. The funhouse wasn't trying to scare them. It was trying to fit them. And if they stayed long enough, it would find a shape they could never leave. As the water rose higher and the walls drew closer, the lights flickered violently. Then, without warning, the room went dark. And in the darkness, something shifted its shape just behind them. Chapter 3 Reflections that know too much. Darkness swallowed the room completely. For a heartbeat, Jonah thought he'd gone blind. The mirrors vanished, the water beneath his legs became an unseen weight, and the world narrowed to the sound of his own breathing, ragged, loud, too fast. Somewhere nearby, Lena whimpered softly. Marcus cursed under his breath. Tess said nothing at all. Then a faint glow bloomed. It wasn't from above, it came from the mirrors. One by one, the reflective surfaces began to emit a dim, milky light, as though something behind them had switched on. The water at their feet shimmered, casting warped reflections across the walls and ceiling. The room reassembled itself in ghostly hues, familiar but subtly altered. The water was gone. Jonah blinked. The floor beneath them was dry again, smooth and slightly warm, like skin left too long in the sun. He looked down at his jeans, soaked to the knee only moments ago. Now they were dry. What the hell? Marcus muttered, stomping his foot. Did we move? No, Lena whispered. The room did. The mirrors showed them standing in the same positions, but something was wrong. Their reflections were sharper now. Clearer. Too attentive. Jonah raised his hand slowly. His reflection didn't mirror him. It lifted its hand first. Jonah froze, heart slamming against his ribs. The reflection held its palm against the glass, fingers splayed, eyes locked onto Jonah's with unsettling intensity. Around him, Lena gasped. Mine too. Marcus took a step back. No, 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 no. The reflections leaned closer in unison, faces pressing against the glass from the other side. Their mouths moved silently, forming words Jonah couldn't hear but somehow understood. We see you. The room shuddered. The mirrors rippled outward, bulging like membranes under pressure. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through Jonah's bones. The ceiling dipped, lowering inch by inch, forcing them to hunch. Tess finally spoke, her voice barely audible. They're not copying us anymore. She was right. The reflections were studying them. Lena's reflection tilted its head, eyes narrowing in curiosity. It smiled, not the nervous, brittle smile Lena wore, but a calm, knowing one. The reflection raised its hand and traced a shape on the glass, as if writing. Lena screamed. The shape lingered in faint condensation. Stay. Jonah backed away, colliding with Marcus. We have to get out of here. There's no door, Marcus said, panic rising. He spun in a circle, staring at the seamless walls of mirrors. There's no way out. As if insulted, the room responded. A seam appeared in the mirror opposite them, splitting vertically with a soft, wet sound. The glass peeled apart, revealing a narrow hallway beyond, long, dim, and lined with more mirrors. The reflection stepped back, inviting. Tess shook her head. That's not an exit. That's a mouth. The hum deepened, vibrating harder, faster. The ceiling lowered another inch. Jonah made a decision. Run, he said. They ran. The moment they crossed the threshold, the seam snapped shut behind them, sealing the previous room away with a muffled thud. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, mirrors on every surface reflecting distorted copies of the same frantic sprint. Jonah noticed something terrifying as they ran. The reflections were no longer confined to the mirrors. They were keeping pace. In the glass beside him, his reflection ran just a fraction ahead, breathing steady, posture relaxed, eyes focused. Too calm, too prepared. Jonah, Lena cried. They're ahead of us. He saw it then. At the far end of the hallway, shapes emerged. Figures identical to them, stepping out from the mirrors as though the glass were liquid. Reflections made solid. The first one was Marcus. It stepped into the hallway smoothly, body fully formed, mirror sheen fading into flesh. Its face twisted into a grin. "Hey," it said casually. "You left me behind." Marcus screamed. The group skidded to a halt as more figures emerged. Lena, Tess, Jonah. Perfect copies, each wearing expressions of eerie calm. Jonah's double met his gaze. "You're tired," it said softly. "You don't belong out there anymore." The hallway bent. Walls curved inward, ceiling lowering rapidly, the space compressing. The real Jonah backed away as his double stepped closer, movements fluid and confident. "We know your fear," the double continued. "We felt it the moment you stepped inside. We know how you think. How you hesitate." Jonah lunged sideways, grabbing Lena's hand and pulling her toward a side corridor that hadn't existed seconds earlier. The funhouse reacted instantly, walls shifting, mirrors sliding apart to form new passages. The copies followed. The corridor narrowed behind them, sealing shut, then widened ahead, guiding them deeper. The funhouse wasn't trapping them randomly. It was hurting them. They burst into a vast chamber, larger than anything before it. The ceiling arched impossibly high, mirrors layered over mirrors, reflecting endless rooms stacked atop one another. Platforms rose and fell from the floor like slow mechanical breaths. At the center stood a single, massive mirror, oval, taller than a house, its surface perfectly still. Jonah felt drawn to it immediately. The reflections around the room bowed inward, their images warping, bending toward the central mirror as though pulled by gravity. "This is it," Tess whispered. "This is the heart." The massive mirror darkened. Then it cleared. It didn't show their reflections. It showed the funhouse from above. Jonah saw the carnival grounds, the rusted rides, the fog swallowing the forest. Then the image shifted, zooming in, burrowing downward, revealing a sprawling, impossible interior beneath the funhouse's modest exterior. A labyrinth of rooms folding and unfolding endlessly, reshaping themselves like living organs. And at the center of it all, them, hundreds of people, dozens of versions of the same people, standing in rooms identical to this one. Lost, trapped, forgotten. Lena sobbed. "How many?" "All of them," Jonah said hoarsely. "Everyone who ever came in." The mirror rippled again, showing something else. A younger version of Jonah, standing at the funhouse entrance. A different day. A different group. Different faces. His memories slammed into place. "We've been here before," he whispered. Tess turned slowly. "What?" "I remember this," Jonah said, dread flooding him. "The fog. The mirrors. We didn't all make it out." The room reacted violently. The platforms slammed upward, nearly throwing them off balance. The walls leaned inward, mirrors pressing closer, reflections screaming silently. From the edges of the room, the copies advanced. Lena's double smiled gently. "You figured it out too early." Jonah stared into the massive mirror and saw his reflection again, older, hollow-eyed, standing alone. Waiting. The truth settled in his gut like ice. The funhouse didn't change shape to trap people. It changed shape to replace them. And somewhere inside this shifting maze, there was already a version of him that belonged here. As the walls began to close and the reflections stepped forward, Jonah realized the final horror. Only one version ever left. And the funhouse always decided which one it was. Chapter 4: The Final Shape. The mirrors stopped changing. That was what terrified Jonah the most. For hours, or maybe minutes, time had become slippery inside the funhouse. The rooms had breathed and twisted, corridors folding like soft cartilage, reflections crawling away when stared at too long. The constant movement had become a grotesque comfort, proof that the place was alive in a way that followed rules only it understood. Stillness meant intention. The chamber they found themselves in was vast, circular, and impossibly tall, its ceiling vanishing into darkness broken only by dangling bulbs that flickered with exhausted light. Every inch of the walls was mirror. Not warped carnival glass this time, but smooth, flawless panes that reflected perfectly. Too perfectly. Jonah saw himself from every angle at once. Front, back, side, angles that shouldn't exist. Lena stood close beside him, her fingers white-knuckled around his sleeve. Marcus paced the perimeter, counting reflections under his breath, while Tess stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something just beneath hearing. "This is the center," Tess said quietly. Jonah turned to her. "How do you know?" She swallowed. "Because it's where everything stops pretending." The lights dimmed further. Somewhere deep within the structure, something shifted. Not a room this time, but a decision being made. The mirrors began to change, not in shape but in content. They no longer reflected the chamber. They reflected moments. Jonah saw himself standing outside the funhouse entrance hours earlier, laughing it off, calling it one last thrill. In another mirror, he saw a younger version of himself at a different carnival, years ago, pulling away from a mirror maze alone, heart-pounding, leaving behind a screaming voice he'd told himself was part of the attraction. Lena gasped beside him. Her reflection showed her pounding on a glass wall, begging someone unseen not to leave her. Marcus stared at a mirror where his reflection walked confidently forward while the real Marcus stood frozen in terror. Tess closed her eyes as her reflection smiled back at her knowingly. "It shows what we choose," Tess said. "What we always choose." The room tightened. Not physically, spatially. The air grew heavier, like the walls were leaning in without moving. Jonah felt pressure behind his eyes, memories clawing their way to the surface. "This place doesn't trap people," he said slowly. "It keeps them." Marcus spun toward him. "What does that mean?" Jonah looked at his reflection. It no longer mirrored his movements. It stood straighter, calmer, older somehow. "It means someone always stays," Jonah said. "And someone always leaves." The reflection spoke without opening its mouth. "Balance." The word echoed through the chamber, vibrating in bone and glass. The mirrors shifted again, forming a single, massive pane at the far end of the room. It showed the exit, the true exit, beyond the funhouse. Moonlight, grass, freedom. Only one path led there. Only one reflection stood in front of it. Jonah. Lena shook her head violently. "No, no, that's not how this ends." Tess stepped forward, her face pale but resolved. "It is. It always is. The funhouse isn't alive like we are. It's a mechanism. It feeds on choice, on guilt, on the shape of who we are when we think no one's watching." Marcus laughed weakly. "So what? One of us just volunteers to die." The reflection finally moved. It stepped out of the mirror. It was Jonah. Or rather, it was the Jonah who had already made this choice before. "You don't die," the reflection said gently. "You stay. You become part of the shape. The rooms learn you. They remember you." Jonah felt something click into place inside his mind, a truth he had been running from for years. He remembered the other funhouse. The other mirror maze. The boy who had screamed his name while he ran toward daylight. He remembered surviving. The room remembered too. "I already owe it," Jonah said quietly. Lena's grip tightened. "You don't get to decide this alone." Jonah turned to her, pressing his forehead to hers. "I decided it a long time ago. I just didn't stay." The floor softened beneath his feet, guiding him forward. This time, he didn't resist. The mirrors around them began to rearrange, not chaotically, but purposefully, forming corridors, exits, reflections that pointed the others toward escape. Marcus hesitated at the threshold. "Jonah." "Go," Jonah said. His voice was steady now. "Before it changes its mind." Lena sobbed openly as Tess pulled her back. The exit flared brighter, the funhouse already forgetting them. Jonah stepped into the mirror. Cold swallowed him. Not pain. Not fear. Just stillness. The room reshaped itself around his presence. Walls curved inward. Corridors learned his footsteps. Mirrors learned his face. Outside, Lena, Marcus, and Tess stumbled into the night air, the funhouse looming silently behind them. No screams. No movement. Just reflections. Inside, Jonah stood alone in the laughing entrance, greeting no one, watching the mirrors breathe. Waiting, because the rooms always change shape. And someone must always stay to teach them how. For more stories, like and subscribe.